Welcome to the Grande Bouffe,
The Big Feast!
with myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy, and our special guest this week, Mr. Matt Blankman. As always, we are here to copiously consume international culture and politics through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer. Mr. Blankman,
Hello.
good evening.
Good evening to you and to Mike.
Thanks for coming.
It's always fun to trudge around in rainy New York when it's 38 degrees or whatever it is, but it's beautiful out. Park Avenue is a light.
Yay,
For the
Park
holidays.
Avenue.
It's a great day to talk about a movie set in sunny, is it Santa Barbara?
It is Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's great.
Which, oddly, the movie kind of makes me want to go to Santa Barbara, which is weird because it's kind of grim, you know, I mean.
Right.
It shows a lot of it shows the fancy side of it, but also shows kind of the underbelly, I suppose.
Yeah, they're showing all the colonialism and murder, and you're like, I just want to take my wife and really, spend a weekend there.
Well, I'll be in Santa Barbara soon enough. We're passing through it anyway. But it is a neo-noir.
This is a good point, and I was going to make the connection here while we're talking Santa Barbara. Not a connection to the movie directly, which we still have. We even said what, but the
Yeah, we got a title. People come to. We also got to talk about our beer.
yes,
but
that's true.
Finish
But
your thought.
well, my thought was that Santa Barbara was where the great detective novelist Ross MacDonald lived and worked for 50 odd years, and he had nothing to do with this particular movie, but it's just tying noir to Santa Barbara, so it's a good city for noir.
Yeah. And I just recently watched The Last Goodbye, which is Robert Altman.
Yes.
Neo-noir with the great Elliot Gould. He's
Yep.
so awesome in that movie.
Let's talk more about who our guest is, Matt.
Yeah,
and,
let's find out some stuff about Matt Blankman.
and why.
What would you like to know? And
Why, who you are, and it seems like it ties into this movie nicely.
well, I'm not a legless Vietnam veteran, but
I take it all back.
who am I? That's a good question. Well, I've known Cole for several years, basically through drinking beer and talking about movies, and so this is I've done some writing here or there. Haven't done any in a while because it was never really my day job, but just a movie freak and beer lover and all about man around town.
That sounds like a perfect guest for this show. If you're out there and you like movies and drinking, you could wind up on this show.
Matt Blankman, bon vivant,
That's
and raconteur.
Yes.
Well, we didn't tell you that we came with a homework assignment for you. I brought the beer tonight, and I brought one that is a kind of do-it-yourself thing. This is from the BRONX Brewery, and it's the name of this beer is Name This Beer! ! And it says, for real, we want you to name this beer. And it has there's a couple of lines and one of those little pencil icons to get you to draw on it.
And it's a bomber.
It's a
Yes.
it's like a heavy ass beer. Is that what you mean?
No. They call this baby a bomber.
With
Yeah.
the bottle?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You guys are better alcoholics than me.
Which would make it a Bronx bomber.
There you go. That's it.
So,
So who knows? Maybe we'll come up with a name that the Bronx Brewery will like, and there'll be an innate connection between Le Grande Bouffe and the Bronx Brewery and Matt Blankman. And
There you go.
BRONX Brewery, let's set this up. Okay, so we watched Cutter's Way. The
Yes.
great Cutter's Way.
with
and
John Hurd.
With John Hurd, who, I maybe this is my age, but I'm like, Home Alone dad.
Yeah, that's right. I always think of him as this, and then he had done well. He was he was the villain in Big, with Tom Hanks. He was he did a lot of theater in New York. He did a lot of movies and TV, but this was sort of probably would have been a bigger deal, but the movie did not make a lot of money and became sort of a cult item. But he's worked. I mean, he was on the first season of Sopranos, which I realize is now 16 years ago, or 16, 17 years ago, but still, he's still around, still making
He
movies.
was in the Milagro Beanfield War.
Yes, Robert Redford's
Redford
film. I'm trying to think of something. There was something else around that early 80s time that was fairly significant that he was in, and I'm just drawing a blank right now. But I read today that when the property was originally being developed from the book, they were talking to Dustin Hoffman to play Cutter.
I feel like I've seen that movie.
And then with Robert Mulligan directing, and that fell apart. And then this is how we wound up with Yvonne Passer and Mr. Hurd, and of course the great Jeff Bridges.
Yvonne Passer, the Czechoslovakian screenwriter and director who wrote Loves of a Blonde, the Milos Forman film, which is an amazing movie.
Well, there's totally a line between Ratso Rizzo and Cutter. I mean that kind of stuck out to me. It's the only character I can kind of think of that approaches this. I mean, they're very different. I think Cutter's a lot more fun and likable, but
I don't know if he's fun and likable.
What?
Yeah, well,
He's the best. First of all, we got to name this beer.
Yeah, we
too.
got to
Let's
name
not-
this. We
let's
got to
name
name
this
this
beer.
Well, I don't know. I thought maybe it would just grow organically out of our conversation.
I kind of want to call it the Blankman.
Ooh.
I don't know. I mean, it's you're not.
I like that. It
doesn't-
also sounds like we're still not naming it.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's perfect.
There you go.
I really do.
All right.
We're on.
My attorneys will be in touch shortly.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys will have to sign a contract with Bronx Brewery.
That's right. My whole family.
It's perfect. Well, you know, they give you the blank slate, so of course, you know, the Blankman is perfect.
Well, I think
Oh yeah, there you go.
I was having this. We're talking about Cutter, right?
Yeah.
The character who is kind of half crazed, alcoholic, Vietnam veteran.
Pseudo racist.
Right. But you can tell it's not really racism.
No.
It's more just trying to get a rise out of somebody.
Yeah.
He utters
He's
a
a-
racial epithet and clearly is just trying to see if someone's going to try to take a swing at him or to make the people at the table squirm.
He really struck me as a Warren Zevon archetype for whatever combination of reasons.
I could see that.
When he first showed it, when the first scene comes in, he's in the bar. He really struck me as this guy of you know, he's been around the world and through the world backwards, and he's got a very unique wartime informed look on life.
Well, and you kind of get. I've never read the novel Cutter and Bone, which the movie's based on, but you get the implication that Cutter was probably. You get the implication that he's very bright and probably someone who was destined to was a golden boy who went off to war and came back a broken person. And you get a little hint of that when the conversations with about his wife, Maureen Moe, played beautifully by Lisa Eichhorn, another actress who she's been around. She's been in a few, I think she was in John Schlesinger's Yanks, and I want to say maybe she was in Soderbergh's King of the Hill. But still never really became a big star, but just it's an impeccable performance of just someone she's still with this guy, and it's sort of, it's all gone to seed, and they can't really move on.
And the film has this interesting, what I caught on pretty early was I thought it made me think of Jules and Jim, because there's a very interesting threesome going on between the Jeff Bridges character, Bone, and Cutter, and,
Right.
and Mo.
No doubt, and you sort of get the sense that it's been that way for a long time.
That's right.
That maybe it goes back to their youth.
Right.
You know, because there's a comment where she says, I still would have married Alex or something.
And the chemistry between Bridges and
Right.
and her and Eichhorn is just, it's seamless. It really is so believable. And I mean, we should say that Cutter's missing part of his left arm.
Right.
And there's a problem. You can't quite tell what's going on with his leg.
I think it's a prosthetic.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
prosthetic.
think
He's
it's
missing a lot of
got
it.
a prosthetic leg.
But and then so we get and Bone is his best friend, who is sort of just a handsome ne'er-do-well, sort of is working selling yachts, sort of is a gigolo, sort of is probably a guy who's just sort of drifted around his whole life. Lives on a boat and doesn't really seem to. He kind
But
of
he's looking out for his buddy.
Yeah, he looks out for his buddy, but he doesn't seem to want to take any direction with his life. He's sort of which Cutter kind of calls him on, which everybody calls him on. Their other friend, George, who it's revealed, there's a backstory with George and Cutter that Cutter's family took George in when his mother had died, but now George is part of sort of the ruling class of Santa Barbara, but he still cares about Cutter.
So to go back to Bone for a
And
second.
wait, and let's just talk about Mo a little bit too,
Yeah.
because her situation is when we're introduced to her, she's drinking a whole bottle of vodka,
It's not subtle that right away this is a person with a drinking problem.
and so Bone, from a distance, from an arm's length, is trying to keep her in check a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, there's some hostility. There's real hostility, I think. He says, I don't like you when you're stoned, and she says, I don't like you when I'm straight. And
There's so many great lines in this movie like that.
So you get these are sort of. It's interesting because I guess the book was written in the mid to late 70s. The movie was 81. And these guys are sort of the detritus of like 60s culture. They're sort of, they never really took root. As we said, you get the implication that Cutter was probably this bright young man who went to war and came back destroyed in many ways.
And Bone's the one who didn't go to war.
Right,
He's Ivy League, and it's almost
Right.
like he's injured for having missed that. Like one person's half a man for having gone, the other one's sort of arrested development for having not gone.
Absolutely. He just seems to be like an overgrown college boy doofus, except that he looks like Jeff Bridges, so he's when the movie opens, he's sleeping with he's getting out of bed with Nita von Pallant, who was in The Long Goodbye, bring it back to The Long Goodbye, at the El Encanto, which seems to be some sort of shishi hotel.
I feel like we're supposed to know LA kind of like, oh yeah, I know where we are.
The Last Goodbye.
Somebody told me that they were in Santa Barbara once, and they made their friend drive them past the El Encanto just because they liked Cutter's Way so much, and they wanted to see it because it was really there.
Is it worth pointing out, because I've been noticing this in movies lately, that Bone couldn't keep his bone for this session, it seems like. So
right,
when he's kind of asking to get paid, it's a little heavy-handed. It's
Right.
My friend needs some medicine,
Right,
and it'd
right.
be real great if you could help him out.
Right. Well, and then he stiffs the valet Parker. Right.
Yeah.
My engine shot. Sorry, buddy. There goes your tip. Which is pretty shitty.
Yeah.
They're three they're like low lives. Like I really didn't go into this movie liking them.
Well,
I think
that's how they're introduced. But I don't want to put too fine a point on it. But they're living a communal lifestyle that's very leftist, and you could call them, in the day you would have called them pinko commies. They're not playing by any rules.
Right. I mean, Bridges doesn't. It's weird. It's implied that he lives on the boat, but then he spends most of his time at Cutter's house, kind of crashing on the couch.
But that's the kind of guy. I know those
Yeah.
guys. It's
And-
it's not exactly clear where they live.
And Cutter's off in L.A.
Right.
probably
Right.
just drinking.
And then, they or in that little that local Santa Barbara bar where they get into that scene at the beginning where where he spins off all those great lines about the thing about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, tree surgeons to the king. They prune Danish or whatever. A friend of mine once took issue with the movie because he said that he thought John Hurd was too over the top, that he was overacting, and I said no. I said, Cutter is overacting. Hurd is perfect because I think Cutter's putting on a performance half the time.
Yeah.
So there's a few scenes where he lets that drop and talks to Bridges mostly, and you just kind of feel his hurt, where he's not being his swaggering madman sort of, look at me and I'm going to quote, Melville and throw my cane around, but where he actually, talks to him, and it's sort of, you get the image of this guy's, the depth of his pain, and that it's a performance.
Whoever won the Oscar for 1981, the year that I graduated from high school, they robbed John Hurd, because his performance in this movie is so multifaceted.
Yeah, I agree.
It is so complex, and it is so authentic. He is just hitting every beat with such a fury.
It's interesting. We haven't even discussed at all the plot.
No.
Which Jeff Bridges in a dark, rainy alley sees something. He's not sure what he sees.
Yeah, he's getting out of his car,
Right,
or he's
right.
parking his car, his little convertible.
Right. He almost gets run over by someone else in the alley, and then it turns out in that alley,
A big Cadillac, driving a big Cadillac.
right, they find a murdered teenage girl, and and he's initially the suspect, and he's cleared, but he thinks the person he might have seen is this guy J.J. Cord, who's the big oil man, tycoon, creme de la creme of Santa Barbara society.
Leads the parade in Santa Barbara, the Latino parade, whatever that.
And that's right,
the colonialism parade,
the Spanish days or whatever, right?
There you
and
go.
there's a sense that Bridges never seems entirely sure if what he's really seen or if he really wants to make a stand or just let it go, and Cutter seems to take it as here's an opportunity to stick it to these guys who've been screwing us and screwing the country and screwing the people. That Cord represents what we'll call now the 1%, right? But beyond that, he's which I thought of in a newly relevant way when we're talking about just the ultimate, all the ridiculous corruption around us, the oligarchy that we live in, where there's no one so there's that wonderful scene where they have the argument, like walking through the park, where he gives the whole thing about it doesn't matter if he did it or not. This is because he is guilty because he's doing this. This is, and of course it's interesting that he's an oil magnate, which has been the big focus for the last 25 years of the oil guys.
Yeah, you kind of get the sense that Cutter's he's the reason why I'm missing limbs. He's the reason these fucking assholes are the ones where I was sent overseas. And then it's in that kind of discussion that the tension, the sort of existential tension between him and Bone kind of comes out because he's the opposite. He's the guy who didn't suffer for these things.
Right.
And so this is kind of his chance to redeem himself in the eyes of Cutter, to do the right thing and to finally not to. Yeah, I'll use it now, though it becomes a very loaded metaphor. It's like to pull the trigger that he didn't before.
Right. Well, there's that scene right in the yacht sales office when George says to Bone, "Sooner or later, you're going to have to make a decision about something."
Right.
And that's sort of, you can tell, it sort of gets the tumblers clicking in Bridges' head.
And George is the guy who was wronged and sided with the people who wronged him.
Correct, because the idea of
he knew he was outgunned. He knew,
right,
he knew
and also
he had to become part of that system in order to survive it.
Yeah, I think George is a guy who never really overthought it. He didn't question why did J.J. Cord help him set up his yacht business or whatever. That according to Cutter, it's because J.J. Cord killed George's father. George doesn't want to look too deeply at J. He's a sort of a simple, affable guy who just wants to live his life. And he's got, apparently, he's got a guest house, so he's living a nice, comfortable life in Santa Barbara society. And yet, he's still, even though...
Well, let's go.
I don't want to give anything away, but it's
okay.
In his mind, he's still very loyal to Cutter and Bone. He certainly has no intention of hurting Cutter. He looks out for him.
And let's clear that bit of exposition up because it's important to the story about how they're related. Because what's the story? That Cutter's mom died.
No, George's mother died, and Cutter's mother took George in.
That's it.
He said, he says he was like a second, my mother was like a second mother to him, because I guess George's dad either was dead and then his mother died, and so he kind of grew up partially in Cutter's family.
So you really get that sense that all these characters have a lot of history.
Yeah, and also the fact that even though now, Cutter lives in, Cutter and, Alex and Mo live in this kind of ramshackle little small bungalow in a kind of not so great part of town. It's kind of implied through the relationship with George, and also just the idea of what they were maybe before the war, that Cutter probably, and the fact that Bone went to Princeton or whatever. Did they say Princeton? They say he went to.
I just heard Ivy League.
Yeah, Ivy League. I thought they might have mentioned a school, but I think you're right. And
shout out to Filmstruck, by the way.
And I think that yes, absolutely,
the Ivy League of online streaming.
But so I think there's an implication also that Cutter and Bone came from some sort of money. They weren't always hippie boat bum types. That maybe Alex was a guy who grew up in a well-heeled family, ready to go to the Ivy League school like Bone did, but he went off to war and everything changed.
He knows how to talk to cops. He has a charm to him.
Yes.
He totally destroys his neighbor's car, which is parked in his driveway.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up this scene because it's such a crazy scene, and
Yeah.
it really, to me, it's one of those centerpiece moments in the movie.
Yeah, well, it just shows how wildly reckless he is. And then you're right, the way he talks to the cops, playing upon their sympathies, because he's a wounded veteran. So he says, duty's something I know a little bit about. He's playing them beautifully.
Oh,
and of
that's
course,
so
the
good.
cops side right with him. And
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
poor schmuck next door would get his car told.
It just goes to show you, cops in the '70s are better than the ones now, because they wouldn't give a flying fuck what you said about that. They don't know better.
That's funny. But it's, that is, he has a couple of those moments. And then I guess the only relationship we haven't really discussed is you got the sister of the victim who then becomes part of this scheme
That's
to
the
try
most
to get.
noir-y part of it is when we're getting into
and
the-
it's the most strained leap that you have to make as an audience member, but it happens because Bone has to suffer for it.
Yeah.
He really suffers for that introduction because he's hauled in as a suspect early on because he's a witness, and they're going to put him over the grill. But I don't want to put, Jeff Bridges is so goddamn good.
Yeah, he's
in this.
I thought you were going to say
movie.
hot, and I was going to agree with that.
well, he's a handsome man. There's no
He
way
is a
around
handsome man,
Yeah.
But I mean, I know we've all been spending the last 10 or 15 years saying this over and over again because we felt like it wasn't stated enough earlier in his career, but just really one of the greatest actors in American cinema history.
No question.
And just so he brings it as he's got the leading man looks and this, and yet he brings a real depth to every performance and gets all the little details right.
He was buttoning his shirt in some scene. I think it might have been when he's at the party at the end. And it's just such sort of like a minor attention to detail. I can't even explain what was happening.
He's been roughed up by the security at the party,
Right.
and he's trying to catch up with what's going on his shirt, and he's so mentally distraught.
Well,
'cause
just the fact that you also noticed
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
character.
and he's trying to button his shirt, and when you think you're gonna button it wrong, and then you button it wrong anyway. That's kind of what he's
exactly.
doing.
That's what it was.
But I think it's great that you brought up how good Bridges is, because to me, Bridges anchors the whole movie because Heard's character is such a wild card that you need Bone as balance to be like, because Bone is also sort of our audience stand-in, because he's sort of like, yeah, I guess, Alex, but I don't know, it seems a little crazy, and so.
Yeah, I like how they play with the Alex's fantasy world
Right.
of getting back at corporate America that caused Vietnam and all
Right,
this
right.
other stuff, and so it's that battle of mindset and decision making.
And that amazing speech where he rationalizes why he would go after and try to blackmail the guy, where he says, right, he said, I saw the war on TV too, and when you see a girl, like a young girl and her mother murdered down in a ditch, he said, you have three thoughts. The first time you see it is, I hate the United States of America. The second time is, there is no God. And the third is, I'm hungry.
Wow.
So...
That is in the movie.
Yeah, and
that
that's
is in the movie.
And that's where he's sort of justifying.
I mean, those are pure theme lines that you're talking right
but
there.
I think that the script
they're solid theme lines.
And I think that the script, and I'm blanking on, I think Jeffrey Allen Fiskin, I want to say, is the guy's name, who wrote the script from the book. But I think his script is smart enough, and Passer, I don't know how you say his name, direction is shrewd enough that it never feels like, here's a movie of big themes.
Jeffrey Allen Fiskin,
Fiskin.
did the screenplay, and
it's
it's Newton Thornburg's novel.
It doesn't play out like, here's a movie about themes, where sometimes you see a movie and you're just shaking your head because it's just so nakedly about a theme and there's no life on screen, whereas this is really well-realized characters, just beautifully played. So you're not just sitting there saying, oh, yeah, these guys want revenge against corporate America. You're saying, oh, you could watch Alex Cutter all day long. It's just a fascinating character. And then you want to know what is there to Bone? There's some substance somewhere. When's it going to show itself?
Well, these are
Mo, the long-suffering wife.
These are real people with real problems and real passions and real ideas. They really... They come through as fully fully formed human beings who have a lot of shit going on.
What's interesting is the best thing that seems like has happened to these characters in a long time is that Bone found a dead girl in a trash can or saw it.
Yeah.
And suddenly Cutter has passion. Bone is thinking about his life choices, and a girl shows up interested in him. And Mo starts buying food. Like that's such a strong, weird scene. And she goes and she spends all the booze money on food, and you almost see like, oh, things are kind of turning around.
I'm glad you brought Mo up again, because there's so much of this movie that's about the male-female relationship and experience, and I love that very uncomfortable scene at the parade where Cutter is talking about the girls in the parade, and Mo's sitting there, and you can't believe that he's daring to say the shit that he's saying. And there's his wife next to him.
He's got a beautiful wife, and he's no catch of the evening, and like he's daring to do that.
And you wonder, well, why is Mo still with him? And she feels a certain loyalty that she can't leave him, even though she knows their life is terrible, you know. And it is a big moment. She decides to buy vegetables and meat and makes a big thing, which is a great little bit of dialogue where he says, oh, I remember food. People were forced to eat it during Prohibition.
Yeah.
Sometime for days on end.
Yeah, that line is still current today. Very current today.
And it says, and then what Bridges says, food will never catch on.
Yeah, that's it. That's
almost too far. Like, that's almost too cute. But then where the scene goes start, I could talk about that scene all day, is they all have their great lines. They go back and forth, and then he calls her over, and she kind of, they're kind of a bit blocked from the other characters, and she goes, "I'll return it all."
Right.
And he makes it clear, like, no, I'm excited about something. I'm not about to hit you.
Right.
I'm onto something. And suddenly there's like this light, and they have this this passion, and it seems like he's actually found something to get excited about. It just involves blackmail and murder,
right?
And
Well,
all kinds of fucked up stuff.
But she then completely disapproves of what he's excited about. Which
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, she's sort of like,
because you're blackmailing the wealthiest man in town.
Right, yeah, like you wake up, this is a stupid idea, right?
But you realize, and this is one of the key noir elements, is that you realize that these poor characters are doomed.
Oh yeah,
they are doomed from the start. And that opening scene in the bar, you know these guys are doomed.
I love the fact that when Mo meets an untimely demise, and I love the fact that the movie never tells you one way or the other what happened there.
Yeah.
So it's left for you to decide whether it was a fire, whether it was suicide, whether J.J. Cord has goons burn down the house looking for Bone.
Yeah, whether it was a lit cigarette and alcohol.
And all of those seem plausible in the fabric of the movie. All of those
fabric
answers.
of this social atmosphere.
Right.
And I think that's very relevant to today's times, because, everybody has to second guess everything now. The rules have completely changed. There are no rules anymore. The fact that Donald Trump is making 20 tweets in an hour at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and he's hitting China and every is SNL. There are no rules.
And in that sort of academic, sort of smart responses, the Jeff Bridges of the world are impotent to do anything about it. Like, I think it's it's very thematically relevant then as it is now. Like, they don't do shit.
It's shocking how relevant this movie is.
And I should say that I think it's Stephen Elliott's the actor who plays J.J. Cord, and he doesn't get a lot to do, but he's perfect. He's really just right on the money. When he does have to deliver a few lines, you get that whole sort of patrician disdain for anybody below him, and just that sense of, I'm so powerful, I can do whatever I want. And it is funny. Yeah, what would J.J. Cord be tweeting? How do you like my mirrored sunglasses?
Yeah, there's a lot of sunglasses being put on and taken off in just such a way. It happens beautifully. It really is perfect.
It's true. When they crash his big society party.
I love that even his wife seems pretty evil. And
yeah. Well,
and on the whole thing, just whispering to her security, like, murder those men for me real quick.
So Matt, I'm curious when did you first see this movie? What was your first?
Yeah, how are you?
contact
How are
with
you
the
in
film?
possession of such a gem? This is
I
amazing.
think. Well, this movie has a cult, which I hate to use that word, but it has a following, I should say. I got first hip to it by, I think, one of my older siblings was a big John Hurd fan. Had seen him in a couple things and
He's so
loved him.
great.
And
It was, by the way, it was Robert De Niro who won for Raging Bull in '81. But I would put John Hurd's performance in this movie up against that.
Yeah, but
performance.
but De Niro won in the '81 Oscars for the 1980 film season, so he wouldn't have been up against Hurd. Would have been against whoever won in '81 for 1981. Movies released in '81, which I'm blanking.
Can I give a shout out to his the prosthetic work in this?
Please. How did they do that scene in 1981? How did they shoot that scene?
Yeah,
because
I know.
think how much like Lieutenant Dan got
CGI'd, right?
Yeah, it's
And
just CGI. Like that's the answer.
whereas
is that
this
they use
is like
computers,
suddenly
but-
John Hurd's got a thing, and he's how did they do that?
there were some times where I feel like I could see his arm like turned up in there, but there is a
what-
specific sequence where you see both his leg and his arm
also,
cut off,
and
it looked amazing.
And also, even when he is just in his coat, and anytime you see Treasure Island, the pirates always
Right.
the hook is way too long. But you can tell, you can tell like anytime somebody's trying to cheat it. But in this thing, it works it works. It
does.
all works.
He obviously, he look, that's what when you hire a New York stage actor, they're going to make sure that goddamn crooked walk with its cane is going to be just perfect.
I couldn't have said it better. Listen to that. That's right. This is why this is a serious New York episode. That's right.
Even though it's a Santa Barbara movie.
That's
But
right.
no, so someone in my family had seen it, recommended it, and I remembered it playing on cable in the 80s, and I was probably too young to get it. And then I want to say maybe it was, I could be wrong, but I think I had one of like Roger Ebert's, big, annual movie books, and I would just read through and read movie reviews, and because it weren't just movies in that year, and it was actually a great start for when you wanted to like go to the video store and be like, never heard of that, but and I think he gave it like a rave review and like 4 stars, and I said, well, gee, that sounds interesting, and I think I just rented it one day when I was probably like 18 or 19 years old and thought, wow, that's heavy. I really like that, and then I've just been a fan ever since. And then it came out on Blu-ray earlier this year from Twilight Time, and they did a great job with it, and I jumped on it. And of course, it's streaming on Filmstruck, which is a great thing because and it's just one of those movies that I've never. It's one of those movies that I don't think I've ever recommended it to somebody, and they came away and said, I didn't care for it. I wouldn't recommend it to every single person. You got to know what they like, but if you like. I think it appeals to a wide range of people, but definitely if you're into neo-noir. But and as you said, it's got that whole relevant social thing going on with just that it's,
it sneaks up on
the
you.
corporate
scumbags.
scumbags.
You start watching it and you think, oh, okay, it's kind of like a TV movie.
Right, it's going to be quirky.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's quirky. Oh, there's
They're
like
gonna have an adventure.
there's a love triangle.
Right.
Isn't that cute? And it just keeps getting thicker and deeper.
Well, and as you said, they're doomed, right? They're
Yeah.
these doomed people.
Yeah.
And I mean, the ending is shattering. It's a great ending. It and I love the ambiguity of it. Right as we said, of the house burning down in Mo, and then even
the
we
story
don't know
about George, that kind of comes out like
Right.
deep in like the second or even third
Yeah.
act, and it's like that could be bullshit. It's kind of exactly
Right.
what Bone needs to get him to do that last thing. So
Right.
maybe it's total shit.
Right, exactly. It could just be Alex manipulating everything, or it could be the God's honest truth. I mean, it does, and that's why, he says, oh, George is scared. George has always been scared.
What's that line of conspiracy theories where like right now we're like obsessed with this the pizza shop thing where the conspiracy theory guy went in there, and it's like this weird line where you're like, well, we all know that conspiracies like in one sense are real because there is a mass manipulation of what we know, but it's not total. It's not that bullshit level of like lizard people, and so Alex is just that perfect guy who's like, wait, are you a total nutcase like arguing for the things that make no sense, or are you just reading the Matrix just finally enough that you really know what's up in this town and we should just throw down and take power back?
But the reason that we can all empathize with it is because there's so much emotional investment, visible emotional investment at stake, because these guys really are great friends. There's no question
Right.
about the fact that they're really committed friends, and they're also sharing Mo.
Yeah. Well, except that it's implied that that's the first and only time that that Bridges and Mo hook up.
And that could be,
Right.
but there's
Well,
there's no denying the attraction.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's
There's
been in
there's a
love with
whole
her.
tension going on the whole
You
time.
get the sense he's been in love with her since.
And
they
she
were-
with him
right,
too.
right,
Yeah.
right. Or that she, right. They
Well,
both have disappointed her in different
They
ways.
they are in a way that kind of seems like it's realer in scripts and in books than in real life. But I think these things happen. Is they're each half of a single man. You know, like one of them quite literally is missing almost half his limbs, but they like one of them has the social power and the connections to get ahead, and one of them has the guts, but they're both broken. And what you're kind of seeing at the end there, and to not give it away because you have to see it, but it is one sort of transcending like what the other one has, and they're like it's becoming like one person, like pulling the trigger.
Yep. And then there's a lot of like, I want to say imagery, but there's a lot of themes that are sort of Hamlet-like. You know, Bowen is sort of like Hamlet. You know, he can't make a decision.
Well, I mean, Hamlet's like thrown out there real hard with all
right.
the
Well, the
Rosencrantz
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern joke right in the beginning, and then and J.J. Cord is like Claudius, right? He's murdered America. You know, he's murdered the ideals of America, and now he's sleeping with her. The
George's
mother.
father was the big
Right.
yacht guy, and
Right.
so yeah,
squeezed
Cord is
him
kind
out,
of the
right.
pretender to the crown.
Right, exactly. It's sort of.
And there's great social scenes. I love the scene at the yacht club where Cutter is just going off, and Cord's wife is sitting one table away.
Right.
Oh,
Yep.
right, yeah. I forgot. And she's great. She's nice and evil, and she just kind of pretends like she didn't really hear it. She seemed a little upset.
Who are your friends, George?
Yeah.
And,
Who are these
and let me just
boys?
say, George is a little misguided because he's too loyal to Cord because his financial well-being is tied into him. But who doesn't want to? If you got to have a rich friend, George is not bad. I mean, he comes and drags you home from the bar at like 6 a.m. Make sure you get home. He buys everybody lunch even when he doesn't sit down and eat with them. Takes them there to play tennis. In his way, he's looking out for Alex too. It's just
true.
that he doesn't.
I knew
It's
he was
true.
he was a fascinating character. The way he reacted to driving Alex home in the third scene is
Yeah.
he's just kind of like, nah, it's no big deal. Of course.
It's matter of fact. It's because it's happened 1,000 times.
Like-
that Cutter's been stranded, somewhere downtown, falling off a bar stool, and George has been around to come pick him up and drag him home. And that's right. There's a familiarity, right? Because the first time I remember seeing, it's like, yeah, who's this guy who's like in the vest and tie, who's bringing him home in his BMW, and yet at the same time just walks in totally at home and is like, hey Mo, and smoking a cigarette. So he obviously is intimate with these people and comfortable in their space.
And it's Arthur Rosenberg that plays George.
Yeah, I was looking him up the other night to see other things that he'd been in, and he's had he's worked a lot, but there was something else of note where he played a judge or something, but it's
Great
again
character actor.
Yeah, just a wonderful character actor.
I love the scene where he calls Bone in, and he's calling him to task.
Right.
And he's trying to make it clear, like, look, this is all got to stop.
Right. Enough of these shenanigans.
Yeah, no more shenanigans. but he's doing it in an authorial way, but also in a caring way.
Yeah, and he's sort of like trying to get Bone to get on this road of like, look, why can't you just get a goddamn house and take a shower and put on a tie and work for me and make some money and just be a productive member of society. You have the brains, you have the know-how, and
you have the outlet.
Right, but Bone just is sort of a dissatisfied drifter as much as Cutter is. It's just
And also he has that obligation. He feels that obligation to Cutter and Mo, and he's struggling with that.
He's that middle term, and in some way you imagine he's got to be the most tortured, because Cutter and Bone are these extreme ends of just non-engagement with the system. But if you do engage, how do you just deal with like seeing these two realities at once and just being like, no, I'll hang out with the person who either did or figuratively murdered my father.
Well, and there's that great relationship between when they attempt the blackmail, where they drive up to the monolithic
the shiny
building
headquarters
to try and get in, and who are you going to give the envelope to? And I love Bones' description of what happened. I love that they didn't show what happened. They let him retell how he had to give the envelope to the blackmail with the blackmail letter in it, and to be passed on to court.
But he doesn't do it.
But he doesn't do it. He himself can't do. He can't get there.
Right.
So in a straight noir, all these things would happen. Is you would just have like steely nerves and you would do it, and no one would be upset about it. This movie is all about the inside of those things. It's like we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Like you're not gonna do it.
Yeah, I think in a traditional noir, which the story of noir is that it began sometime roughly in 39 or 40, and it ended with Touch of Evil in 59, 850 noir films, and that was kind of it, and then done. And then everything pretty much post is neo-noir. But it relied so much on MacGuffins, and there's not a MacGuffin to be found in this movie. This movie is all about
the
MacGuffin. The dead girl is the MacGuffin. I would.
Yeah, she's the MacGuffin, but
we don't really know anything about her.
But she's dead, and the reason the reason that we do care about her is because her sister comes to represent her and stand in for her.
No, that's very true, but I do agree that it is sort of a MacGuffin because it sets everything in motion. But yeah, you do care, and it's also just the idea that the J.J. Cords of the world can you loot the country and rape the environment, but here they are literally raping and killing an underage teenage girl and dumping her in a garbage can.
Yeah, Cord is a couple things at once. He's both corporate America, but he's also like literally a serial killer. It sounds like.
Well,
like
I don't know if he's a serial killer.
Well, he sounds like he has a history of picking up hitchhikers and raping and killing them and dumping them in dumpsters.
Well, no, he says he likes to pick up hitchhikers in that article they're reading. It doesn't say that there's not like a string of dead ones.
Well, that we know of.
Well, true.
That we but
I mean, the movie wouldn't. I don't think you have a movie.
It should be pointed out that in California, LA area during this
81,
time,
yeah,
there were a lot. The Hillside Strangler. There was a lot of this kind of stuff going on.
Ramirez was around here.
But I think that Cutter's theory on how the girl got killed makes more sense than he's a serial killer, which is more that, some sort of sexual humiliation where, you laugh at me and I'll beat the shit out of you with my silver-tipped cane until you're dead, that sort of thing.
That was really graphic to do in front of the victim's sister.
Yeah, it was a bit much.
At a country club. I mean, really, like I'm trying to eat a salad.
It's a Cobb salad. Well, it's been such a delight having Matt Blankman on the show, and to have named.
I feel very honored.
The Bronx Brewery's beer, the Blankman IPA. I really hope, and I think they should.
I'll have to buy more of it now.
Adopt it.
You should get it by the caseload for free.
Yeah, they
should send it to you. So now we will certainly be.
They'll be getting a tweet about this.
Yeah. we will fulfill their requirements for naming this beer.
Maybe we'll get. They should do commercials, and we'll get John Hurd and Jeff Bridges to reprise their roles.
I'll allow it.
And also, if John, maybe we could get John Hurd.
I don't know how they would.
Or Jeff Bridges to come on the show sometime.
There you go.
Which would really be a coup.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for listening. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas and all that holiday stuff.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.